Shane Bruce here, back from the commissioners meeting. This is the 9th of January 2022. Um, and probably need to add some about the political landscape. Apparently, it snuck up on our legislation. Even if the courts knew about it, they haven't really been telling anybody. First off, ever been one of those people that have to go into a group of people and say, "You're surrounded," or "We're surrounded," even? Well, I've had to do that, but really, people have been telling people that are in Tennessee for a long time. Uh, Basically, since Tenova moved in the corporate hospitals, there was a Tennessee Healthcare Liability Act, which announces that no one may file a suit, a civil action, against a hospital uh, without a 30-day notice and an affidavit by an expert doctor witness in the field of whatever it's supposed to be. So, for some reason, legislation has been changed to say, oh, hospitals get a 30-day notice. You can't even file on them. Uh, what this is in turn, oh, and the expert witness has to be from Tennessee or the surrounding states, a limited bottleneck of the population of doctors, especially those in expert witnesses that have to be practicing the field at the time as well. And you hear from doctors, if you ask around the doctors, their license gets pulled. They are forcibly put out of their practices if they challenge certain doctors or certain hospitals or anything else like that. The rest of them are simply bought out. They are put on a retainer saying you have to obey the hospitals. So, spring of surprise, I guess it was, on the committee on, I had them guess out of the 1,234 cases in 2018 dispositions, how many cases were medical malpractice over there on this side, right? None. Nobody could even file a case. 2022, it looks like people started filing. 4 of them dismissed. Just out of hand. I'd say they didn't make it past the first hearing, as there is a complete deathlock happening. Now, don't assume that these hospitals and doctors are benevolent either. Um, there is eugenics happening in Tennessee. Over half the counties in the state have instilled a voluntary sterilization for inmates and prisoners. It's a free service. But in 2017, a judge, Bedenthal, I think it was, told people they could either be incarcerated or let loose early, 30 days early, if they get sterilized. This is coercive sterilization. Now, of course, this went on for about a month or two, and I think 70 inmates were spaded and snipped. Now, this is coercive. I mean, these people might be fearing for their lives in jails and everything else. Their lives might be ripped apart by being incarcerated. And this incarceration could be anything. It could be a traffic ticket. You understand. These aren't like hard offenders or sexual molesters or deranged sexual molesters. These are normal people, any inmate in White County. By this order, of course, in Tennessee, nothing, there is no boards of professional responsibility as anybody would expect them. The legal board of responsibility won't do anything unless the DA presses charges against the lawyer. So they're useless. They're under the DA. They're pretty much under criminal rule. I got a case right now where the opposing attorney is witness tampering. He actually told some third-party witnesses not to appear. That's the definition of witness tampering. And he was paid to put a motion to quash by the respondents, and that's bribery. That's legal fees being paid. This is obvious. It's on the books. It's on the docket. The Judge Pemberton froze. He hasn't heard a hearing in over a year. He gave a 20-minute tirade about how he wouldn't hear anything bad about lawyers. Any time there's a click that happens that says they're not under the law, whether it be doctors or lawyers, and these are two usual groups, they are in violation. You can assume they're a predatory criminal or otherwise criminal, predatory, killers, whatever they may be. Like in the Dr. Klein audio in the first video where I'm reporting to the commission, he says that it's natural for doctors to kill patients, basically. Other people can't do it, but doctors can. Anything on the hospital grounds that he considers natural. For adverse drug reactions and opioids are impossible. He's deranged. But we have deranged people in the hospitals now, and there is the Tennessee Supreme Court ruling of January 20th, 22, almost a year old now, that says medical battery and intentional misrepresentation claims are covered under the Healthcare Providers Tennessee Health Liability Act. That means a doctor can rape, maim, mutilate, and no one can take an action in the civil court. And in Campbell County, we have a deranged ME, and I think most MEs might be. See, there's small bottlenecks. There's only one per county heading it. So, like our most recent criminal judge, Ayers, was on a committee for grant writing for, I think it was called the Campbell County Health something Alliance, where the hospital had hired him to write grants or proposals for funding for grants, and so therefore he'd have a conflict of interest. And I've gone through 5 judges, and 2 or 3 of them have had conflicts because in a third party in the action, I'm not even suing the hospital directly, they had a conflict with a third party. Who has a conflict with a third party in a civil action? That's crazy. Anyways, ME's covering up homicides, just off the reservation. Takes one, it's done. Criminal judges apparently been bought. There's no action against them in civil because nobody can get the civil case even through. And as I said before, don't believe that they're benevolent. Since the incursion of Tenova into Tennessee and these hospitals, corporate hospitals buying from whoever owns them, the Healthcare Liability Act, but also so has eugenics. I mentioned half the county has eugenics. And in White County in 2017, Judge Bredensole said, hey, sterilize 70 prisoners. That's a human rights violation. That's coercive mutilation. Sterilization, these people are permanently sterilized, vasectomies, and they put some kind of rub. It's irreversible. So, of course, this went to London News Post, The Guardian, London Post, etc., etc., and even though there's no boards of responsibility either in doctors or lawyers in Tennessee that's functional, that news notoriety made him withdraw the offer. Actually, the Judicial Review Committee says, hey, this is a high potential for these people being coerced. And that would be, of course, a international war crime against one's own people. Genocides happen in the exact same way. Same thing with my father, held forcibly against his will, given procedures he didn't want. They refused to treat the things he did, and they gave improper procedures ordered. They had him listed as type 1 instead of type 2, and fed him dextrose with the he had insulin resistance from Flomax, another adverse drug reaction. He'd have been perfectly healthy. I mean, he wasn't poor, he wasn't down, he wasn't out, he wasn't downtrodden. The target group is his wife, a nurse at the hospital, was just having a fussle. That's insane. And it was a 30-year-old fuss. I mean, she was just a little bit deranged of a Jocasta complex, and my younger sibling has a bit of an Oedipus, and they just hired people to gang up against them, thugs. I assume thing in the hospital. So that death is tragic, and I mean, he was wealthy. He was self-made millionaire, had houses, flipping houses, rentals, land contracts, buy to own. People really liked it. He offered good prices on houses, usually too good, actually. I'd get after him and say, hey, the market price can sustain a whole lot more. But so hospitals are killing people, and around here, Tennessee, it's ubiquitous. The crowd will say, "Hey, yeah, they're killing us. They're killing people." I mean, you hear it all the time. They killed my so and so. They killed my nana. Bad adverse drug reaction. It's always been a pretty bad hospital, is the reputation. But of course, it's Sterling. They're like 4 or 5 stars because they're falsifying causes of death. I mean, it's not even to protect them from suit. They're already blocked that. We'd have to have a doctor move in or a new ME move in. I even had this crazy idea when I was at the committee meeting, because I had it last night, is that the county legislation do something against the Health Privacy Act, the HIPAA, Health Insurance Privacy Act, whatever else, and declare that the hospital has to openly share, and we put it online, every patient's care, procedures, and everything else, so they're not keeping it secret when their medical malpractice is happening. If I know my dad was on Flomax, I could say, hey, 1% of the people have amnesia and start falling down. That was the symptoms. It was caused by an adverse drug reaction. But my mother hid that. If you look in the evidence folder in the MR OKI medical record file server, there's a 911 call where I'm trying to get to his doctor to find out what's going on. And my mother just slamming down the phone and saying, "You won't find out for us here." I told her it was abuse to what she was doing. She was like, "No, you're abusing both of us." Anyways, doctors and lawyers in Tennessee, you've heard of Christopher Dunch, the death doctor. What's considered the top doctor in the state around here goes to Texas and gets charged for murder, multiple counts, attempted murders, and whatever else, and doing time. It's known as Dr. Death. There's a movie about it. Anyways, they basically go to, I guess, to some school. They learn a few words, vocabulary, the jargon of their industry, so they can talk in a secret code, so to speak. But it's kind of handy, the jargon, because normally, I mean, it's not just because of that. If you're doing a search on the internet and you want to find scientific medical journals, you use a jargon. You don't use big word. You use hypermelanoma or hypotension or hyperglycemic or hypnoglycemic or things like that. And it pulls up the medical journals, and those are the definitive authority. Usually, a doctor's research happens by scientists, health physicists, and the doctors. Here's what happens to doctors in the modern world: they get a patient in, the patient writes down a bunch of symptoms. The doctor goes back, and there's an app for this basically, and they type in the symptoms, and they come up with some kind of diagnosis or possible diagnosis. This comes with medicine. It's a idiocracy type thing. They just plug it in, get a lab, and say, "Oh, this," and they hand the medicine out, and blah blah blah, and that's what will happen. That's all that'll happen unless the patient is wise, say, "Hey, this is working, this is not," or "I'm having side effects or not." Dad couldn't say side effects. He had amnesia. He didn't know where he was most of the time. Take him to his favorite restaurant. He thought he had never been there before. It was scary. Anyways, it was a drug-induced amnesia. Flomax, by the way, 1%. And lawyers, apparently they just learn some jargon and get set out, and they're protective gills. They're incompetent coming out. And like the lawyer doing the witness tampering in the case that I'm against, I mean, that's a felony. I mean, almost any idiot would know not to do that, but he's like careening belligerently along, saying blah, blah, blah. And that I shouldn't say that it's witness tamper because it'd be damaging. It's like he doesn't understand that criminal laws might apply to him. Neither do these doctors. Medical battery. Intentional misrepresentation. That's where the Nazis told the patients to line up for flea derating or, delousing, and hit them with Cylon 9 or whatever it was, and killed them in masse. That's the type of horrific, malicious medical things going on. So don't expect these hospitals to be benevolent. That's insane, especially after the coerced sterilization, that's a war crime. Doctors have this oath not to participate in torture or do these matters with possible coercions or anything else. And they lined up and cut up 70 some patients, I hear, 30 some males, I don't know. But the reports are there, 2017, White County. You can look all these up. No cases can be filed in civil cases. The DEA can't prosecute. The law enforcement are almost worse than helpless, and absolutely worse than not having a medical examiner is Dr. Klein, who's actively sabotaging, giving misinformation, propaganda. Those on the audio recordings, and listen to those for yourself. But there's a political scheme that where these hospitals from outside the Tennessee come in and have a death grip on Tennessee, not only Campbell County. Campbell County is just a case where we have a deranged ME. But yeah, it's incredibly bad. That's a whole thing. Now, eugenics hasn't been in Tennessee since 1920. This is 1920s when the Nazis invaded America with their propaganda. They wanted censorship in movies. Censorship didn't exist before 1920s, but they didn't want their soldiers or anything bad to be said about Germany. So they instilled the entire rating system, the RMG and PG and everything else. That comes from Nazi censorship propaganda. Eugenics came from somewhere. They said it was from the North, but 5 states were involved in a eugenics study saying, the Southerns were stupid and illiterate and mentally inferior or something. And that might have been bought into. It probably wasn't bought into before. Appalachian was a fairly well-educated place before the Civil War. The libraries and schools got burned in the war zone. So that was a bit of a setback. I mean, up in the mountains have nothing to do but to ourselves and read a library, perhaps. I'm probably the most literate person in the Campbell County. I mean, there's might be other heavy readers. I haven't met them. But we're miseducated greatly. There's a Simon Says thing that makes Tennessee particularly susceptible. It's a stupid Simon Says. I mean, it's just whatever attitude comes up was the education. Listen to voices, speak in tongues, do what you're told. I'm the big guy. That's the teachers. I mean, the teachers would just have an ego fight. I mean, it's just crazy. Or their personal problems, or they'll discuss those for an entire semester. Sometimes the teachers would be absent. We had teachers cooking math and cornering these slower, less educated, or more likely to party students of future customers. We got some strange stuff. Admittedly. But Campbell County is 95% educated, highest crime rate, most addictions, highest unemployment, like 70%. So Campbell County will be literally the most targeted of any eugenics program using that rationale of let's see which group of people we kill off. So, strange times. Very strange times. And no one should be above the law. One of my ancestors, William Marshall, helped write the Magna Carta, says not even kings should be, but somehow these doctors and hospitals have put themselves above the laws of Tennessee and literally, provably, are attacking the constituents. Mutilations with the sterilization, the killings, which is on every word, but nobody can even get a word into the courts. The fight ring of civil actions are completely blocked. So we're looking at something rather desperate times, I think. Completely violates any constitutional law. Everything has to have a legal remedy. That's pretty much the Constitution, equally among parties. And there's not even a remedy. The DA, sheriff, and civil courts can't hear it. Perhaps the county opening medical records would at least causing a frenzy from Washington saying, hey, the HIPAA laws are violating, forcing this hospital to disclose all records. But it might save lives, and we have no other legal remedy. I mean, what do they want? Civil war? And versus hospitals, it's crazy. And whatever legislation has been bought, I joined this to my BP oil explosion with the toxic rains and arsenic rains, my own poisoning, where I had to gain 80 pounds just to store the arsenic in my fat so it wouldn't kill me. I mean, I've been on survival mode for 10 years. So I'll stay at home. I wear my mask out. I can my own food. I have my own greenhouse. Got lots of dogs. And I get to read a lot. But I suppose that's about it. Hospitals will kill you, or worse. And the courts are behind it. Intentional misrepresentation claims against health providers are ruled that the Tennessee Healthcare Liability Act applies to a lawsuit based on the theories of medical battery and intentional misrepresentation against healthcare providers for injuries arising from a surgical procedure. Battery. That was Dr. Dunch, where he'd just take some pliers and jam those patients up and down until something fell loose or cracked, or he cut into random people. I mean, again, in Texas, he was found as a first-degree murder. Insane. In Tennessee, they're stupid enough to protect him. Don't they know that they're on the wrong end of that stick there? Oh, state legislatures and Supreme Courts. I mean, we're talking some very stupid people. I mean, think about a state where nobody thinks, is this a war crime before enacting their actions? Internationally, is this not just completely unconstitutional and a war crime? It must be part of the formative training. I don't know. That Blunt was a notorious criminal found in Tennessee and land grab and stealing from people compulsively. How many other states is going on? But that must be bribery on a level of Nuremberg war crimes. And, if it goes international news, it might make a difference. I think there's a David Horowitz, a lawyer, doing blogs on the Supreme Court ruling saying, hey, so many things illegal. Sterilization is illegal. But they're illegal by the Italian laws, international laws, which can be used. I mean, there's a 15th Amendment saying rights to imparted people from other states or other countries can be imbued by the 15th Amendment. We're supposed to be vicariously grab rights. But, heck, if judges don't understand witness tampering and intentional misrepresentation during medical battery, they get their own word in the basic assault of a lethal weapon. They go, oh, it's medical battery, rape, whatever else. So, everybody's been telling everybody, you're surrounded and there's no hope. A lot to do about it. Other countries have more rights. We're somewhere in China with one-child law. Oh, that's what's causing it. I knew I was talking for a reason. The mathematics telling certain people that the world has to be depopulated of humans, and it does. Our energy footprint per person is far beyond the Earth's capacity to provide the cars, the deliveries, things coming from other places, our roads tearing up the oil type thing on hydrocarbons. It's no longer on the surface. They're going down and using. Watch my BP video, what if it's a planned weapon of mass destruction, and you'll understand exactly how dangerous that is. We're killing a planet. So I understand the rationale. And these doctors who are taught to be animals because they're natural predators on their own, homicides or genocides, and thought humans are a bunch of chemicals, are saying, have to depopulate. Even America, even a rural Tennessee, apparently, which is not untrue. But there's other ways to go about it. I mean, you don't go into a Nazi stick. I mean, if the population is as poor as we think, there's 1 or 2% want to depopulate. Make them pay. Offer money for people to be sterilized. Offer 10,000, 50,000, who knows what. There'll be thousands, hundreds of thousands of people go, $10,000, and they don't really want children or something else. I think children are great, personally. But they have no plans or hope for the future, or else they would be standing up to this stick. So, I mean, there's other ways to do it without becoming Nazis, you freaking idiots. If any, psychopathic, homicidal conspirators to violate the United States and kill off people who's listening, offer money. See how many will say, heck yeah, 10 grand? Take them, snip, snip. Take your balls for 10 grand. Yeah. I'd say there'd be a lot of takers, actually. But don't violate every constitution, every sensible thing there is. That's just belligerent and rude. See all the rest of y'all later.